Hi there, it's Mrs. Batt, and today we're going to be talking about cylinders. I have a variety of different things here in front of me that I want to talk about. Generally speaking, when we talk about a cylinder, we are talking about a closed three-dimensional shape that has a circle for a base, and on the other side, parallel to that, there's another circle, and they're both the exact same size, so they're congruent. There's another math word for you. And then, let's say we set the cylinder on the circle, it's going to have straight sides that connect those two circles. So if I were to draw a line through my circle anywhere on this flat shape, that line is going to be at a 90-degree angle to the sides. I don't know if you can see that, to the sides of that cylinder. Okay, so this is a cylinder. Now notice that it has a lid on it that's going to add a little bit of a lip here. So when we draw this, I'm going to take this off. You'll see cylinders all the time. Here I've got a can of breadcrumbs. Notice it's got a circle base, another circle, and this lateral surface that goes around it connects the two circles. Okay, now let's think about it. If you were a manufacturer and you were going to make something like this that has an opening, okay, what you're going to want to do is you'll want to know how much of this cardboard you need to make this tube that the breadcrumbs are going to go in, and then of course you're going to need cardboard across the bottom, but you might not need a top, but you might be making that out of a different type of material. So in this case, this is a cylinder. If you were to find the surface area, you'd find a round on the bottom and then leave the top open. Okay, here's another cylinder. It's graham cracker crumbs. Now this one's a little bit funny looking. This is, you can see it's got a circle base. On the other side of that, it's got a circle base, and then this is just like a little short, fat cylinder. If you've never had these, they're quite delicious. You get them from Trader Joe's in Indianapolis. We've got a couple other things here that students often get mixed up. Here is something that kids will think, oh, that's a cylinder. Well, no, it's not, because notice that we don't have straight sides connecting those two circles. Yes, we have a circle and a circle, but the circles are not congruent. So even if we were to close this, it doesn't make a difference because we have two different size circles, and then the surface connecting those has to slant in order to get those connected. All right? If you guys know me very much, you know I love to drink my Coca-Cola, and sometimes people think that bottles, like I've had students send in water bottles or other, maybe even a cup from your kitchen that has slanted sides like this did. But again, keep in mind, look, there's all kind of curves here. So even though if you look at it kind of in a cross section, you might see a circle here if you ignore the bumpy bottoms, but that's nice. But the fact that we have these curved sides and then a different size bottom and top makes it not a cylinder. And finally I have my coffee cup. Parts of it may be cylindrical. Like I see this bottom part of it, it's kind of like got straight sides and it's got a circle down here, but notice right here it kind of bows out a little bit, and so the top is a different size than the bottom. So this is not officially a cylinder either. So here's the cylinder that we're going to use, or that I'm going to use to do the a hands-on activity here. And again, I'm going to go ahead and take this top off so it doesn't mess me up, and I'm just going to pretend that this is closed here. And you're going to have to do the same thing when you draw, because odds are when you go get some materials, they will probably be a wrapping paper tube, a toilet paper tube, paper towels, something like that, that has an open end. And we're trying to learn what this would be if it was an actual closed cylinder. So when you draw your net and when you do your project later on in class, you need to make sure that you pretend that all your bases have closed circles on them like this, and that we don't have this opening. So we'll just pretend that's not there. Alrighty, so I'm going to get set up. Let's see how we can do this. Alright, now I've got some red paper here. You're probably going to go get some paper as well. And we're going to have to figure out how to get this cylinder on here and draw a net that we could wrap up around this. Okay, and that's going to be a little tricky. When we did this before with a rectangular prism, it was a little easier because it had actual straight sides. It was easy to hold it. This one's going to kind of roll, and we're going to have to be careful that we measure everything correctly. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with my circle part here. I'm going to put it pretty close to the edge back here to give myself as much room this way to tip things. Okay, so make sure go ahead and put it pretty close here, and I'm going to go ahead and trace around this circle, and I'm going to have to be careful, really careful this time, to make sure nothing slips. So I'm going to go ahead and trace. Now, I have been thinking about this, and it's going to be difficult when I tip it to make sure that I tip it correctly. So I'm going to put this here, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and maybe put a tick mark here. And actually, maybe I should go ahead and put a straight line all the way down so I can stay in line here. So I'm going to go ahead and use a straight edge, and I'm going to go ahead and put a line here. And then that way I kind of know when I start and when I stop. So I'm going to put this back here, and I'm going to hopefully have this line in the right place so when I tip this, the line is what hits the bottom. Okay? And looking at it now, I can't tell from where I am where that line is. So I'm going to make sure I kind of color the top of this a little bit so I can see from my angle where that line is. And maybe I should do that on the other side also. Put a little like tick mark there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that here so I know where my line is starting. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and tip that down. And again, I have to kind of make sure, I'm looking at the little tick mark I put on this end. I want to make sure it lines up with where I marked there. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of like draw like a little straight line here and put a tick mark so I know where it starts at. And now right where that tick mark is, I'm going to go ahead and pop this up, being very careful. If you're working with a partner, this might be easier. Make sure everything's aligned again. Pull this back so you can see. And I'm going to go ahead and draw another circle. Now, I'm putting my two circles exactly in line with each other. You don't necessarily have to do that because really when we cut this out, I think we're going to have to attach the circles separately because they're going to just barely be hanging on to the rectangle. All right, now here's what I want to do. I think I'm going to need a ruler here. We know that we have the top and the bottom, and this distance between those two circles is going to be the exact height of that cylinder if I did a good job here. Okay, so now I have to figure out how to draw a rectangle here that's going to be the exact size here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of wing it real quick. Maybe I need a bigger ruler. I'm going to go ahead, because here's my tick mark. I know I need a line straight across this way. And I'm going to need a line straight through here, but I'm not quite sure yet how long they need to be. So I'm going to try to make them parallel to the best of my ability. And now remember we took put this line here. So tell you what, I'm just going to start over here, maybe a little bit beyond my circles. And now I'm going to go ahead and take the line that I put on my cylinder and I'm going to try to line it up as best I can with the line I just drew. Okay, so that's my starting point. And now I'm going to roll this way very carefully to make sure that my edges stay on these lines I already drew. And I'm going to go all the way around one time until that tick mark is back on my paper. So can you see what I'm doing here? I'm going to start here. And I'm going to roll, and you have to make sure that you're rolling straight so it stays on those lines you started. And I'm going to actually go all the way to here till I see the tick mark again, and I'm going to mark it here, and I'm going to mark it over here. And that's how long that rectangle needs to be. Now you'll notice on the one that I drew, these little lines I started here, I didn't make them quite long enough, did I? So I'm going to have to line up my ruler here and kind of finish that off and then finish that off here as well. And now I have a net. And I have to go ahead and label them. And the measurements I need to know are several things. Now, remember, we're going to be finding the area of this circle. And the way that we find the area of a circle is pi r squared, which means I need to know what the radius of this circle is. And once I find that, it's going to be the same as this circle. Okay, so keep in mind, when we look at a circle, when we go straight across the circle from one end to the other, the middle point is where we have to cross through. So be careful we're not just drawing a chord, because if we're not very careful, go straight through and we like cut it off a little bit, that's a chord, and we want a diameter that goes all the way through. Okay, so when you measure that, that's actually going to be the biggest measurement you can get. So you might want to play with your ruler a little bit and kind of spin it and go back and forth and see where's the widest space that you can get, and that will be your diameter. Okay, so when I measure this, I get about 3.75 inches. So that's my diameter. And now I'm going to divide 3.75 by 2, and this is probably going to get a little bit ugly because I find out that my radius, okay, I put a center here. You see what I'm doing? And I'm going to draw a line out from the center here, and I'm going to label the radius with, I'm just going to draw it so I can see it. R equals 1.875 inches. And of course, the exact same on the other circle as well. And I did a pretty bad job of finding the center. I'm going to redraw that. R equals 1.875 inches. Okay, so now if I turn this over so that you can read it, you see I've got both of those radii labeled. Okay, now I have to label the other pieces. So what is this measurement here? And if you recall, the distance between the two circles, that's the actual height of that cylinder. So all I have to do is measure how tall the cylinder is, and that's what I can put on that measurement of the rectangle. So when I do that, I'm pretty sure I did this already, and I get 4 inches for me. Who knows how big yours is? I'm going to round it off. I get about 4 inches. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and label it on both sides just to make it easy. Now, the hard part is when we look at how it's amazing how long this rectangle ended up being. So this long side of the rectangle, if you remember, we rolled that cylinder, and basically that length there was the same amount as if we went all the way around the circle. And if we go all the way around the circle one time, remember we call that circumference. So I'm going to go ahead and write that word on my net just so I remember what it is. I'm going to do it so I can see because I don't want to try to. So circumference. And of course we have a formula for that. We know that C equals either 2 pi r or pi d. I'm going to go ahead and say pi times diameter, because when I measured my diameter, I got 3.75, and then I just divided it by 2. So if I put the diameter in place there, I'm going to call that 3.75 pi. And of course, this side is 3.75 pi as well. So when we get all this labeled, here's what you should have. You should have a circle with a radius labeled. You should have down at the bottom a circle with another radius labeled. You should have a rectangle. And the side that goes between the two circles, that's the height of your cylinder. You measure that. And then this long piece, we can't measure with a ruler because it doesn't wrap around like a nice tape measure. So we call that circumference because it did wrap around the cylinder. We write the formula, and then we're going to go ahead and plug in the number. So my circumference, the side of this rectangle, is 3.75 pi. Now we're going to find the surface area, and I think we're going to do that in another video.